Hello and welcome to AFAL Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date and independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on afalnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Ahval podcast series we are doing here at Ahval. Today we are going to discuss Safe Zone, which was announced as an agreement between the U.S. and Turkey in early April. Today, we have a very prominent expert on the issue, Syria and the Middle East, Nicholas Heras, who is the Middle East Security Fellow at the Center for a New American Security, a think tank based in Washington, D.C., and also who is also a senior analyst at Jamestown Foundation, also another think tank in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the program, Nicholas.
Thank you for having me.
So we are going to talk about details of the safe zone that was announced on, I think, April 7th. I just looked up. As a general view, before going into details, what is your understanding this discussed or agreed safe zone?
Well, the fact of the matter is there is no agreement at this point in time on what the safe zone would look like. Turkey asserts that the safe zone should be at least 32 kilometers into Syria, if not 40 kilometers. The SDF is willing to have a safe zone that extends 5 kilometers most everywhere between the Euphrates River all the way to the Syrian, Turkish, and Iraqi border on the Tigris River, with some small places where that safe zone will extend 9 kilometers. The fact of the matter is that the United States is trying to referee its NATO ally, Turkey's demands, with its best non-state actor partner in modern history, the SDF's concerns. To this point in time, the U.S. has done a very good job of preventing Turkey from unilaterally invading northern eastern Syria and trying to dismantle the entire SDF project. My sense is that what really has changed since the beginning of August is that the team tasked to handle negotiations between the United States, Turkey, and the SDF, which is led by Ambassador James Jeffrey, really does believe that Turkey is intending to unilaterally enter northern and eastern Syria without coordination of the United States. That's what led to the latest flurry of diplomatic engagement, and that is what has led to the agreement of a U.S.-Turkish military coordination center, which has been established in Urfa, the area of Urfa in Turkey, to try to hash out the safe zone. What I've heard from members of the U.S. team is that there are some strong red lines that have been imposed by the U.S. military. One red line is that Turkey is not allowed to unilaterally patrol wherever it wants east of the Euphrates in northern eastern Syria. That's a big no-no. All Turkish military movement has to be chaperoned by the United States or by ally forces such as France. 2, the SDF will continue to be the major and primary post-ISIS security, administrative, and governance structure for northern eastern Syria. There is no alternative, and Turkey has put no credible alternative on the table. So with those 2 red lines, I actually do think that there is some possibility for us to have the contours of an agreement. And, to be fair, the United States has done more for the SDF than it has done for any other non-state actor in modern history, and has done more for the SDF than it's done for many state actor allies.
I understand. So these red lines are very important details. Recently, I think a week or 2 ago, Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu said that Turkey will not allow U.S. officials stalling tactics apparently referring to Manbij roadmap that was again announced as an agreement about a year ago, perhaps, but Turkey is not happy about it. Turkish defense minister every other day or two talking about again Turkey's conditions, that Turkey will control this zone, otherwise Turkey will take its own initiatives and all that. Erdogan said in August Turkey is going to add a new victory to its history. So what is this leaving us? I mean, Turkey, do you think Ankara is going to be happy with these red lines and accept what it is?
Well, this is a really important question, and I think that we need to sort of unpack it. First and foremost, the Turkish military is already overextended. It's overextended in Euphrates Shield. It's extended at Idlib. We're already beginning to, in northwest Syria, we already see the challenges that the Turkish military is facing in maintaining a demilitarized zone agreement and its forward operating bases around greater Idlib in northwest Syria. There's been a lot of attrition since the coup in 2016 within the Turkish armed forces, where many of its senior commanders have been replaced. Turkey has really relied on drone warfare in eastern Turkey and in northern Iraq against the PKK. The ability for Turkey to have secure lines of supply and reinforcements in order to have an active military presence in northern eastern Syria unilaterally and without the support of the coalition is very difficult. And I think that is known both on the Turkish and on the American sides. Now, there's another element at play here which needs to be talked more about, not only in the press but by analysts, which is that the United States has given Turkey a lot. The United States has increased intelligence sharing on the location and activities of senior PKK leaders, which have led directly to Turkish military strikes in eastern Turkey, but also in northern Iraq. The United States actively monitors the Syrian-Turkish border east of the Euphrates and provides that intelligence to Turkey. The United States has literally nurtured the SDF and has put pressure on the YPG and the PYD to build up a more inclusive structure and to act with restraint. And so there's an active chaperone in the United States, the SDF, active monitoring by the United States, the Syrian-Turkish border, and active cooperation of the United States with Turkey in regard to PKK. In a lot of ways, Turkey is acting like a petulant child. It's acting spoiled. It believes that by showing force, it can lead the United States to capitulate to it. When you listen to U.S. officials describe it, there's a lot of frustration. It's as if Turkey is acting that the United States needs Turkey, not that Turkey needs the United States, and that it is Turkey that is the nuclear hyperpower, not the United States. In actual fact, Turkey is a middle-ranking country in the world that has some regional influence in the Middle East and Central Asia, and which has some long-term economic and political challenges facing it. And the United States is a hyper-nuclear power, which has the ability to project its power throughout the world. And so there's this sort of level setting that needs to be done between the United States and Turkey. I think fundamentally, the United States is most concerned about being placed in a situation where Erdogan, because of his own internal political calculations within Turkey, and the fact that he does seem to sense that his political opponents within Turkey smell blood in the water and are coming for him, tries to use the Kurdish file as a way to whip up support for him to continue to hold on to power. And that may lead to certain decisions, such as a unilateral military invasion of northern eastern Syria, that force the U.S.-led coalition to make the choice to have to fire on Turkish forces in order to protect the SDF. And that would be a major challenge. So we're not there yet, but I think that what we've seen in the events that have occurred over this past month is that as much as Turkish officials may talk a big game, They realize the power imbalance that they face vis-a-vis the United States.
I understand. And thank you for this insightful comment. It you apparently following Turkish domestic politics very closely. Turkey just removed 3 Kurdish mayors in this week, couple days ago, and many people inside Turkey commented that Turkey, who was unable to intervene northeast Syria, now intervene basically its Kurdish cities instead of that. When we listen, Mazlum Kobani, head of the SDF, he gave a couple of interviews in recent weeks and saying that safe zone basically what the Syrian Kurds wanted in a way to protect itself from Turkey instead of other way around. Do you think the Syrian Kurds has achieved what they wanted by this agreement or current structure that you have laid out here?
This is one of the real questions that will shape the future of northern and eastern Syria. I'll sort of recount a couple of anecdotes that I think really are important for us to understand just how close the United States military has grown with the SDF. A senior U.S. military official told me within the last year that in many ways he admires General Mazlum because he believes that Mazlum has played a weak hand stronger than any other person he's ever met. And the fact of the matter is that the United States and its coalition partners have deliberately and with great care built up the SDF to be more than just the YPG, to be a truly multi-ethnic, multi-sectarian force that can be responsible for local security and can facilitate local governance and the provision of services throughout post-ISIS areas in northern eastern Syria. And that is a real sacred bond that has grown between members of the U.S. military and the SDF over the last 5 years. I do think there's a difference in opinion between the State Department, which is staffed more by officials that come from a Cold War mentality. They place NATO and the Turkish-American alliance via NATO as a higher priority than sort of counterterrorism. And there's a newer generation of U.S. military officers that don't come from that Cold War background, and they come from a sort of global war on terror background. And under that rubric, they look at the SDF, what has been accomplished with the SDF, as a real game changer in how the U.S. approaches its engagement in global conflict. I think that the big thing that we have to remember is that General Mazlum and the SDF has a powerful card to play. And this powerful card is what has allowed them to continue to enjoy the support of the United States, which ultimately is the guarantor of their security. Without the United States engagement in northern eastern Syria, there is no security for the SDF. Without the United States keeping Turkey from having the ability to fly its drones, which have been really important for Turkey in its war against the PKK, which was important for Turkey in its Afrin invasion and its policy of mass displacement in Afrin, without Turkey's ability to own the skies over northern eastern Syria, there is no capability for Turkey to launch a successful military operation. And so how the SDF got this card that is given at U.S. support is this. 11,000 members of the SDF have lost their lives in the war against ISIS. 22,000 members of the SDF have been wounded in the war against ISIS. Nearly 1 in 5 SDF members that were mobilized to fight ISIS died. The United States nurtured the SDF to fight and defeat ISIS in the name of global security, whereas Turkey facilitated the movement of foreign fighters to join ISIS and ISIS's ability to use cross-border trade from Syria into Turkey to strengthen itself. And in that critical period between June 2014 and June 2015, the height of ISIS, the Pentagon estimates that at least 1,500 foreign fighters entered Syria from Turkey a month. Those foreign fighters that joined ISIS were critical to allow ISIS to fight as hard as it did against the US-led coalition and against its local Syrian partners, and allowed ISIS to enact a strategy where it's been able to sort of try to melt into the population of eastern Syria and western Iraq. The US nurtured the SDF to fight ISIS. In many ways, you could say Turkey nurtured ISIS. And so that, I think, is the ultimate card that the SDF has to play.
I understand. Yet, Ankara sees SDF and certainly YPG linked to the PKK and as a national security threat, and it has been asking Western allies, including US, to recognize them as such. Certainly, Turkey is unable to convince, I think, any country in the world to, make such recognition. So, going forward, do you see another scenario, but Turkey changing how it views YPG or Syrian Kurds there?
I do, and I think we've already seen this. That Turkey has engaged pragmatically with the YPG and the PYD before the breakdown of the peace talks between the PKK and the Erdogan-led government in 2015. I mean, the YPG had facilitated the protection of the Suleiman Shah Shrine in northern Syria. There were members of the PYD, Syrian Kurdish members of the PYD, that were allowed to enter Turkey and to hold meetings with Westerners and others before the breakdown in peace talks. And I think, the U.S. team, to its credit, understands that this is a larger issue at play. It's not just about Syria. It's about Turkey's threat calculation vis-a-vis the PKK throughout that region. And Abdullah Öcalan has made it very clear that he is willing to re-engage in that process, and that he's trying to get the Kandil faction to agree to that. And you see it in how the U.S. team focuses on Syria. They put a lot of emphasis on Syrianizing the political movement that has developed among the Syrian Kurds in northern eastern Syria, to have them focus on building up a sustainable local governance that power shares with other communities and with other political factions within the Kurdish community as well. And to essentially put pressure on the Kandil leadership to say, okay, we are ready for peace talks. Jamal Bayek, with his Washington Post op-ed, I think sort of put out the first, marker on that road and said, okay, we're ready when Erdogan is ready. And so I think that we're in an interesting time now. You've seen it in how Turkey's internal political machinations have played out, where during the Istanbul elections, it was almost as if Erdogan was, to use a phrase, BG, trying to get Kurdish support. Ultimately, that failed. And you see that now with CHP mayor in Istanbul is calling out in solidarity with the mayors in eastern Turkey that had been arrested, the HDP mayors. And so it's an interesting time internally within Turkey in regard to its politics. So there may be a moment, not right now, but possibly in the near future, where you do see an honest return to a Turkish government PKK peace process. And that will alleviate a lot of pressure in terms of the sort of the geopolitics that are present in Syria.
So you talk about a little bit of new power sharing, bringing different segments of the local population into the administration in northeastern Syria. I think this is one of the topics. The new local councils are going to take over in northeast Syria with this new agreement. So it is what should we expect? And do you think it is realistic to expect SDF and Syrian Kurds to this power sharing agreement with new local councils?
I do. And there's a lot of sort of misinformation that's been put out about sort of the self-administration authority of northern eastern Syria, which is the governance authority that is charged with stabilizing northern eastern Syria. And the fact of the matter is that these local, the structure that is being built really does try to put power down to the canton or the local level. And fundamentally, the cantons are run by local actors and local politics. And so the question about power sharing really is a question about, okay, what is the system that can best represent northern eastern Syria's diversity? And the idea of the democratic society and democratic confederalism that was outlined by Abdullah Öcalan was a direct response to the Qamishli soccer riots that were predominantly between Syrian Kurds and Syrian Arabs in 2004, and which led to intercommunal strife. And we see with the implementation of the democratic society in northern Syria, this genuine attempt to try to build out a system that gives local communities a lot of power, but also allows them to network into a larger authority that can help provide resources for them in a historically, chronically underserviced region of Syria. And so there's a lot left to do, and I think that the big theme that we can expect from international supporters of the SDF and the Self-Administration Authority of Northern Syria is to tie development, recovery, and civil society support to continued diversification and inclusivity in local governance. It's a major theme of post-ISIS stabilization.
I understand. I am coming to an end. I got, I think, two more questions. The one that it has been several years, actually, people are speculating and discussing that whether there could be a Syrian, Kurdish, and Damascus rapprochement. Do you sense any kind of warming up in the relations between the Syrian Kurds and Damascus these days?
Well, there has always been a level of pragmatic engagement between the PYD, for example, and Damascus. Damascus essentially handed over local security and governance to the PYD or Tevdem and the YPG in July 2012, which marked the beginning of the Rojava Revolution. Relations between Damascus, however, and the SDF and the Self-Administration Authority in northern eastern Syria are very fraught, and they've become worse over time. Damascus views the SDF and the Self-Administration Authority as agents of the Americans and working for American goals and American imperialism. Russia has made it very clear that it cannot be the lobbyist for the SDF in Damascus. There have been, periodic clashes between local YPG and SDF forces and pro-Assad forces in some areas in northern eastern Syria. Assad wants control over the oil resources in northern eastern Syria. The SDF won't let him have that. Assad wants control over the wheat and water resources. The SDF won't let him have that. The structure that's being built for governance and security in northern eastern Syria is in many ways incompatible with the Ba'ath regime in Damascus. And then in the sort of the administration and civil service and a lot of the local armed groups that have been incorporated to the SDF and to the Self-Administration Authority of northern eastern Syria, you have former opposition fighters and former opposition civilian members that are working with the Self-Administration Authority and are working inside the SDF. So all of this makes the SDF and the Self-Administration Authority in many ways highly incompatible with rule from Damascus by Assad and the Ba'ath regime, which actually places the United States and its coalition partners in a very interesting and dangerous position, though. There is every possibility that over the next several years, the United States and its coalition partners help northern eastern Syria recover, help build up the incipient governance, security, and administration of northern eastern Syria, stabilizes northern eastern Syria, improves people's lives better than they were before the conflict began, yet Assad still remains in Damascus, and the UN-led political process to create a future Syria that's stable and is not ruled by Assad is stalled. And then the question becomes really one of a handover dilemma. Can the US-led coalition, in all good conscience, force the Self-Administration Authority and the SDF into a marriage with a Damascus-led government that's still ruled by Assad? I don't think so. And I think we are in sort of the first few kilometers of a long trek and a long journey in Syria.
I understand. And my final question, a little bit different than the safe zone and northeastern Syria this time. In Idlib, Turkish military convoy got bombed just a couple days ago, and Turkey-backed rebels withdrew from Idlib's Khan Sheikhun. Now, Turkey is one of the posts there, they call number 9. If I remember correctly, it's in Merak. Now, basically surrounded by Syrian regime forces. This is supposed to be the escalation zone. Turkey accuses Russia and Syria and Assad regime accuses Turkey for not disarming the extreme elements in that zone. What's your take on? I mean, Turkey and Russia, we are supposed to believe these are new strategic partners after the S-400s. Now we see, again, they are on opposite sides of hot conflict there.
It's interesting because you see this play out in Turkey's domestic politics, where Imamoglu and Erdogan have different visions over Turkey's role. Erdogan, in many ways, has tried to position Turkey over the last few years as a Eurasian power, where it balances its relationships with China and Russia in the same level as it does with the United States and NATO, which may be actually historically where Turkey should be in terms of not only its geographic position, but its cultural influence and the influence that its economy could have in the surrounding region and other areas of the world, such as Africa. However, what that has done is that in the context of Syria, it's put Turkey in an awkward position because there is no foreign actor that has as much influence over the future of the Syrian conflict that neighbors Syria than Turkey. Turkey has tremendous gravitational pull on the Syrian conflict, more than Russia does, in terms of its ability to sustain over many years in involvement in Syria. And Russia understands that. Russia also understands that Turkey can turn on and turn off the taps of support for what's left of the armed opposition in northwest Syria. Russia also understands and is frustrated by the fact that in Idlib itself, never mind Greater Idlib, which includes northern Hama provinces and pieces of Latakia province and pieces of Aleppo province, Turkey in many ways has subcontracted out local security and governance and authority to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. And, Turkey is still dependent on the goodwill of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in order to supply and reinforce its military outposts as part of the demilitarized zone agreement. And really where we're heading is that this latest bout of violence that has occurred in Greater Idlib over the last few months has potentially given Turkey the opportunity to take on more authority in Idlib. The destruction that has occurred in Idlib, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, cannot provide for the people, and that cannot provide for reconstruction. Only that can come from Turkey. HTS can't provide for all the people's needs with the mass displacements and the existential needs of food and medicine and shelter. Turkey can provide for that. Turkey also still controls, via its own influence or directly, the largest assortments of armed opposition groups in northwest Syria. Turkey has tremendous power over the situation. So you can begin to see Russia's frustration from that point of view, which is if Turkey and Russia have had an agreement in place and Turkey isn't acting on that agreement to remove Heras, which is the Al-Qaeda affiliate, named Al-Qaeda affiliate in northwest Syria, or Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, or other groups like the Turkestan Islamic Party, from the perspective of Moscow, never mind the perspective of Damascus, it seems as if Turkey is an enabler of Salafist jihadist movements that want to continue the war. That having been said, I think that there is a very credible scenario that Turkey takes on direct administration of Idlib, slowly but surely, and then very rapidly. And that situation would give Turkey tremendous influence over the future of Syria because it would control almost 15% of the country, and it would control what is left of the armed opposition. That's a nightmare scenario for Damascus, but from Moscow's point of view, is it a bad thing to have a return address? If jihadists attack Russian military forces at Hamamein in Latakia, or jihadists break a ceasefire, Russia, Moscow, has return address, which is Ankara. So I could see this scenario where, as a result of this current campaign in Idlib, the effect is that Turkey takes on direct administration of Idlib.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you so much again. Today we had Nicholas Heras, Middle East Security Fellow at the Center for a New American Security think tank based in Washington, D.C. We unpacked a lot of details of the safe zone and some from Idlib. Hope to talk to you again in coming weeks and months. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you. All the best.